Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next interview is with Madeleine Sims-Fewer and Dusty Mancinelli, and they are the writers, directors, producer, and Madeleine's the star of a new film, Violation, that's having its U.S. premiere at Sundance. And I was fortunate enough to have interviewed them back at the Toronto International Film Festival for this film, and not something typically that I would be drawn to, but when the publicist reached out to me, I was pulled in when I read a little bit about Madeleine and Dusty and saw some of their earlier work. It all of a sudden took on a new meaning, and I realized that there was way more going on here than meets the eye. And this is a film that some of you out there are going to absolutely need to see. It's powerful, it's fascinating, it's unique. It turns this particular genre on its head. I mean, some people are calling it a horror film. I'm not sure I would, but definitely a film that is going to open your eyes in some pretty unique and fascinating, and in some respects terrifying ways. It's as they will tell you in the interview, and I so loved having my conversation with them on Face to Face here. But this is a very personal film, and it's kind of I guess you could say it's a study in morality. This is about a woman who is attempting to restore her humanity in a very particular kind of way. The way they use sound in the film is utterly genius. It is a beautiful film to look at, and it's a world that we wouldn't normally step into. I sure hope, but because of such a engaging and I'm going to say beautiful way they've told this story, it brings up questions about dysfunction and about family, and it's like I said, it turns horror on its head. It's about the way the past is informing how we see each other. This is about being trapped. It's about being frozen. It's about catharsis is taking on a different role here in this film in Violation, and you're going to need to watch it and see why. This is about working through our own past, really, and how do we exercise our own demons. And perhaps time does not heal all wounds. Well, I hope I've captured enough of your attention, and if you're thinking about seeing this film at Sundance and it appeals to you on any level, buy the ticket, step in. And as far as I know, it now has a distribution. Executive producers David Hamilton and Deepa Mehta from Canada. There's a lot going on here, and so step in, buy the ticket, listen to the podcast, listen to the interview coming up, and look for this film in the future. It's called Violation, and it is the U.S. premiere at Sundance. Madeleine Sims-Fewer and Dusty Mancinelli, and I felt thrilled and honored to be able to talk to them about such a personal, intimate story that they so clearly felt needed to be told in a very unique and compelling way. Don't forget davidpecklive.com, facetofacelive.ca for more information about my podcasting and speaking and writing. And if you made it here through iTunes to this interview, please leave us a review. We would so appreciate that. We need it. If you made it to us through YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. It's really quite simple, and leaving a review is pretty simple too. And if I could even go further, share about this on social media. Send it out to your family and friends. Sign up for the newsletter. We only send out about 6 of those a year. And there you have it. It's Face to Face. It's another fascinating, interesting interview that I had a blast doing. I look forward to talking with Dusty and Madeleine again in the not so distant future. But coming right up, an important conversation with two Canadian filmmakers, Madeleine Sims-Fewer, Dusty Mancinelli, about their new film, Violation. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by two very special guests here with us today to talk about a world premiere of a new film called Violation at the Toronto International Film Festival. We have Madeleine Sims-Fewer and Dusty Mancinelli to talk about this, can I say disturbing but important new film? Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
So let's go there. I'm right out of the gate. I'm gonna, and you know what we haven't talked about yet is what about spoilers? So I'm gonna leave that to you guys. Cut me off if you think I'm going too deep into something that's part of the story. But this type of film wouldn't normally probably pull me in. But as I started to read more about some of the themes in the film, I started to think about trauma and PTSD, and I hadn't even seen an image, other than your face, Madeline, in the poster, I suppose, in the promo. And I already started to say to myself, you know what? I bet you there's going to be way more going on here than meets the eye. I would imagine these types of films get sort of, boxed in sometimes in a way, if that makes sense. But I'd love to hear from you guys about that. You've had a physical screening, you've had an online screening. What's the response been like?
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about it being presented as a horror film, but also not necessarily a horror film. I think it definitely, there are horrific parts of it, and it is an exploration of this one woman's trauma. Um, but I mean, at its heart, it's a film about sisters, and it's a film that does explore PTSD and trauma, and just kind of the responses within families to people's trauma.
Yeah, and I really think the best thing about genre films is they can act as a vehicle to amplify, personal stories and to explore meaningful relationships. And that's really what struck us about that genre. And what we wanted to do is really try to shine a light on this relationship between these two sisters and really dramatize how extreme things can actually get.
And we're sort of, I guess, we really have put ourselves out there with this film. We knew that there were going to be provocative elements in it, and we knew that, like, there's full frontal male nudity. We knew that wasn't going to be palatable for everyone. We knew that it was going to be a film that would rattle some cages,
Right.
and we kind of made peace with that, because we felt like it was important to explore. It's a very personal film to us, and I think we really felt like with our first feature, we wanted to say something that we really know something about and we have an opinion on. And even if they're not everyone sees it in the same way we do, if there are people who take something away from it, if they feel heard and validated and they feel like we've understood them, then we've kind of achieved what we want to achieve. And there have been some wonderful, really lovely responses to it.
Well,
I
do,
mean,
do, do you know what, Madeline, is so interesting? I was kind of thinking about how I always reflect a little bit on how I would step into interviews. And this is a difficult film on some levels, and yet stunning and cinematic and beautiful. I mean, it's a family film, which is I love what you guys have done. And, it's about two sisters. It's about family. It's about history and how you've just sort of turned that in the genre. I guess I'm not an expert, as I've already mentioned, on its head. And I just so love that about storytelling and about filmmaking. But one of the things I was thinking of saying to you, Madeline, was I wanted to ask you, and this is a testament, I think, to the writing and the directing and everything. I wanted to ask you, are you okay? Do, do you know what I mean? Like I was so in from the get go, and I just want to reach in and give you a hug and say, everything's going to be fine?
that's great. I mean, I think that it's kind of fantastic that you asked me that question. And yes, I am.
It's
And
good
I
to
think
hear.
in a way, this film for me, like the acting in it as well, it was a very kind of purging experience for some.
Mm.
I think when people explore personal stuff in their films, that has the most powerful impact, hopefully. And it was definitely very personal for both of us.
But it did mean, I think, because we were coming at it from that angle, that we had to kind of live in this world for a
Yeah.
pretty extended period
Right.
of time in our lives, and so we're quite happy that
To
it's
come out the other end
that
alive.
we're out of the tunnel and we see the light of day again, because it is in order to capture that trauma and that kind of ominous, unsettling tension. it really does require you, I think, as a writer to live in that space, and as a director and in post to kind of immerse yourself in that world.
And there's like a strong, great history of revenge films that deal with similar ideas that we love and are inspired by. And I think, just to speak to what you said about us kind of flipping tropes on their head, when we decided to sort of enter that milieu of revenge films, we weren't interested in just saying the same or perpetuating the same ideas in the conversation. We really only were interested in joining that conversation if we had something new to say.
Yeah, and that space is really filled with sort of this idea of wish fulfillment. They're designed around having an audience cheer and be excited by the protagonist executing their kind of act of revenge or whatever that retribution is, and there's something kind of like cathartic for the audience in those moments. And for us, we were more interested in trying to capture the kind of realism of what would it really be like, what's the emotional psychological toll on actually getting revenge, and what does it do to your morality, your character,
and your relationships.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of in a way the film's meant to kind of scare you into
Right.
not wanting to take revenge, because you're like, okay, it's definitely not worth it.
Well, it's interesting. By the way, I have to ask this: do you both have bracelets on that say "What would David Cronenberg do"?
No, but we are huge fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, I've always, I'm a huge fan, and I've always felt that violence in his films and others, that it should be the kind of thing where, and I'm thinking of a scene in History of Violence in particular, where you turn away.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't Dusty, to your point about scaring you, about this is what it would be really like. I mean, okay, maybe we all love the Dirty Harry films, or I'm a huge Western fan, but really the violence that it's not comic book if this was real world, right? And it seems to me that that's where you wanted to take this I guess you could almost call it the thematic of I guess you could almost call it a subplot in a way, I suppose.
Yeah, I think realism is really integral to our visual aesthetic as well as performance style. And when it comes to the violence in the film, there's actually not too much violence, and we don't show you the violence in the way that you normally see it in a horror film, which is lots of blood, lots of gore, lots of close-ups. You actually experience it from afar. And the thing I think that makes it more shocking, or what feels more realistic and therefore more terrifying, is the length in which we force you to watch these acts. Like you're uninterrupted takes. And it's you hopefully just feel like you're in that room, in that space, watching it unfold. And because we're, again, not, and it's in wide shots, it's not, we're not pandering to the kind of like glorification of violence that you often see, I think, in this genre. And in many ways, that makes it more terrifying.
There's actually a scene in Eastern Promises that was influential to us as well, in the steam room with the.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. Let me guess, it's definitely the steam room,
because it's so scrappy and sloppy and messy, and it just feels real. And we never wanted it to feel like that heightened kapow, kapow, like punching.
Right.
It needed to feel like this is what it really is like.
Yeah, and so much so, I guess one minor spoiler, without revealing too much, is that Madeline's character in the film vomits at one integral moment. And it was really critical for us to try to restore her humanity in the moment that she's losing it. To show you that she's not this sort of Dexter-like character, but who's a real human being who's done an awful thing, and now she's paying the price for it. And the level of realism was so important to us that Madeline insisted on doing that for real.
Yeah, that was something.
Wow.
Something that when we wrote that scene in the script, I knew that I would really be doing it. Yeah.
We had one take.
We did.
One take. Well, that's good to hear.
Yes.
We scheduled it right at the end of our shoot so that if it did really affect me for a couple of days, I would have those days to recover. But actually we did that one take and it went great and it was all okay.
Do you I'm a huge Raiders of the Lost Ark fan. Do you remember Indy doesn't like snakes, and
Yes, of course.
the well of the souls is opened up, and he looks at Sala and he says snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? Why did it have to be I'm going to say loons, ice cream, certain types of trees? I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be the same again. It's basically what I'm saying. Yeah, I hope you can hear the smile.
Yeah, no. Well, the loons, like hearing loon calls. First of all, they're mating calls, which is what makes it so unique.
Mm.
They're horrifying. You know, they're
You're
really
like quite like soul shaking.
yeah, but they're also so distinct in sound,
Yes.
and so that felt like such an appropriate natural element that could
Mm.
uh, bring the audience into Miriam's kind of internal turmoil. And I think what was really important to us as well is to draw a parallel between the kind of raw power of nature, the kind of,
Right.
nature has no morality. There's a ruthlessness to nature, and humanity continues to attempt to operate outside of that. And I think the film is really kind of, forcing us to ask deep questions about humans, and whether or not we're really as sophisticated or morally superior as we think, and how easy it is for us to kind of return to this kind of primitive state.
Madeline, is it for Miriam? Is it nature? I'm thinking nature. I'm thinking about that existential dread, I suppose. Even and the way that music and sound is used in this film is just brilliant. By the way, but is she cruel, or is this coming from a sense of an overblown sense of justice, or uh, I think, I mean, this is a serious film, right? This isn't the Pale Rider, and then hell followed with him,
Mm.
or this isn't the High Plains Drifter. This is a thoughtful a woman, thoughtful piece. Yeah. Anyway, I don't even know if that's a fair question,
No,
but
it's a great
it's
question. And yeah, I think it's both of those things that you said. I think she's both cruel and she's also got this overblown sense of justice. And what's really interesting um, to me as a filmmaker and as a young actor is I kind of grew up watching films like Taxi Driver and A Clockwork Orange
sure.
Um, and the Bad Lieutenant and these films with these great male anti-heroes who who are cruel and who have this sense of uh, vigilante justice, or this kind of the way they think the world should be, and they're sort of characters who are deeply set apart from the world, and kind of alienated and isolated. And I wasn't seeing any. I loved those characters. I loved watching them, but I wasn't ever seeing women represented in the same way. It was either
Mm.
women who were just all out cruel or crazy or evil, or women who were righteous. And I'm craving seeing female characters who are both.
How have audiences reacted? So can you talk a little bit more? I mean, we sort of started going down that path a little bit, but I'd love to hear about and again, congratulations. I mean, it must be pretty thrilling to have been in front of a live audience. It's been a few months, but yeah, I'd be interested to know. You've probably had quite a few interviews now, and so on. How are people reacting?
Yeah, it's been really positive so far. And at the premiere at TIFF, we screened at the Bell Light Box in Cinema 1 and Cinema 2, and it was a theater of 50 people because of the COVID guidelines. But we had a real thoughtful discussion with the audience afterward, and you can see like some audience members were walked away in tears actually, and seemed to be deeply affected by the film in a way I think that helped us understand that it is resonating with people, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it's definitely polarizing. It's not for everyone, and I think because we try to walk a real fine line where we want to encourage conversation, and we want to encourage you guys to explore these characters and what they do without us judging them so much. I think it ends up sometimes being misunderstood by some
I mean,
members.
it's interesting because there's kind of a flip side with two very polarizing responses. One is that people really understand Miriam and they connect to her and her emotional journey, and there's been a lot of kind of positive responses to how people have felt the emotion of the character. But then there have also been people who are just like, she's psychotic, and I didn't understand her journey at all.
And I think that that's probably, for the most part, a gendered separation. It's just really, we're not used to seeing female characters do those things, and it's such a funny. We were just having a conversation today about Joker, and how you've got this sociopath who goes on a kind of rampage, and you have all these young men loving it because it somehow, they see themselves in this vigilante, in this kind of anti-hero. But you don't see that so often with female characters. So I think that's been kind of fascinating to us. I think also,
and she's not a titillating character either. I think there are films like I Spit on Your Grave and Miss 45, which are great films. I love those films, but you've got this highly sexy woman running around in sexy clothes seeking her revenge, and it's I think there's men can get behind that.
But when you invert it, which is what we've done, and you confront the audience with a lot of full frontal male nudity, it leaves some audience members really uncomfortable because they don't want to see that. They didn't come to see male nudity, so it really kind of.
So, Dusty, speaking of inverting it, when I saw the winch, I was a little concerned where we were heading.
Yeah, that's actually a real winch, and Madeline, 50-pound winch, and Madeline.
How come I believe you? Yeah, yeah. What I want to know is, what did you guys leave out? That's what I want to know.
So much.
Yeah. I'm sure. So there's some really deeply philosophical issues, and there's a scene where Madeline, and maybe you need to speak more about this, but the intentionality of Miriam's character. Oh, by the way, I just got to toss this one out. Miriam Caleb, was that some sort of biblical allusion there, or?
Oh, maybe subconsciously. I don't know if that was
just Old Testament violence.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up Christian. I'm agnostic now, but maybe that kind of trickled through.
It's just interesting, yeah, and it hit me near the end of the film, and boy, you want some good old violence, just head to Leviticus.
We should start saying that was absolutely intended, but I think that was like the Minotaur reference in the Shining that people insist was Kubrick's intention, but. Really
well, there's authorial intention, right? And I've always found that pretty fascinating because you so indwell. You guys already talked about stepping outside of this film, but you must have really indwelt the characters, the roles, the existential dread, of it all. And but Madeline, the Miriam's intentionality is really fascinating to me. And so she's psychotic, she's a mad woman, but I really don't think so. And it's like the decisions, that she would have had to have made to get to where she gets to. I'm thinking of the cooler, for instance, which is frightening on so many levels to me. But and yet I don't think she's out of her mind. And I think that Hitler Christ reference, the Lenin reference, is an interesting one because when we think about it, madman, right? Responsible for but hang on a minute here. You can't just brush this kind of stuff under the carpet. It's not that easy. Way more complicated, I think, and way more contextualized. And I love the fact that we're talking about this stuff in connection to your film. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. To us, she's not insane. She's reeling and very deeply from a traumatic event where the trauma has been compounded by her sister's reaction. So it's not just what's happened to her, which is horrific in itself, and to be violated by someone who you love and who's close to you is arguably just one of the worst things that can happen, and shakes your sense of self so deeply. And the way that you see the world and your trust in yourself and in everything around you. But she then reaches out to her sister and is completely shunned and misbelieved. And that, I think, just really twists her.
Right.
And something I mean, this film's really personal, and Dusty and I had conversations early on in our friendship about things that had happened in our own past, and the conversation came around to revenge, because you inevitably start thinking about not necessarily the lengths of revenge that Miriam goes to, but it's satisfying to think about getting your revenge on someone who's hurt you so deeply. And I think Miriam just takes that to another level, where she has nowhere to turn, and it's the only thing that she can think of to release herself and to release her sister from who she feels is someone who's incredibly evil.
Yeah, and I think what that kind of makes it kind of more interesting for us is that at its heart, the film is really exploring these dysfunctional sisters, and they have this emotional baggage in their past that has seeped into their present. And we can see how Miriam is justifying her actions, and how she's convinced herself that she's actually her sister's savior, her sister's white knight. And really, she's really just doing this all for herself. It's a very similar kind of arc to the Walter White character in Breaking Bad, where he says he's doing it for his family, but he discovers he's really doing it for himself. So it's that kind of exploration of selfishness and familial dynamics that are really interesting to us.
I think you both should have maybe written a book about this as well, and maybe that's going to come afterwards. Is that a possibility? Yeah. Teach a course. Like, seriously, this could be used I could see this being used in a course on gender and violence, or gender and sexuality. It's fascinating. I think Madeleine, you commenting on the relationship between their sisters, and you as well there, Dusty. But when they're in the water, and she's kind of coming clean to Greta, and the immediate is, what did you do? Yeah. And then even with the implication being that it's her fault, right? That could be sort of the campaign, right? Oh, it's her fault, right? Because it seems like, as a culture, don't we sort of bend towards that to some degree? Isn't that what this film is and stories like this are trying to correct, or from a revenge perspective, set the record straight, if I could use use that phrase?
Yeah, even if you look at something like the way that society views affairs,
yes,
the woman is very often the person who's blamed, the other woman, and it's
right. You led me along, right? You sent the wrong messages, or whatever.
Yeah, it's like this femme fatale, and a lot of blame is thrown at the woman's feet. But I think what we were really kind of exploring in that scene, and just in the whole relationship between these sisters, is their past has informed the way they see each other, and they see each other totally differently. So Miriam sees Greta as this helpless person who she needs to look after, and Greta sees Miriam as this selfish person who is constantly getting in the way, and just kind of looking out for herself. And this so often happens within families, where you have these ideas of someone, you have this idea of who your sibling is, and you can't shake it, you can't see beyond that, and you get locked into it. And I think that can be really dangerous and damaging.
You had a little bit of a shout out there to free will and determinism, and I love that little I think it was a fireside conversation. And again, I'm marveling at the layers and the depth and the philosophical musings in a film like this. It's so wonderful. Maybe you guys are winning me over to horror. I don't know. Is that what's happening here?
Right.
And just so you know, I wouldn't actually call this a horror film. I think that sort of came out early on.
Yeah, no,
but can you talk about that, Dusty? That little metaphysical sort of shout out there?
Yeah, I think Madeleine and I love to talk about philosophy. It's a big part of how we live our lives. But I think we are have I convinced you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We have more free will.
What's he convinced you of?
Yeah,
that free will doesn't exist in the way.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
yeah, it's just an interesting idea that that we're fascinated by, and then when we talk about like this is a real, it's a fable about morality, it becomes really interesting to what role does determinism play in our choices,
and also, and then thinking about that kind of extended into the editing the film as well, and this idea that the past and the present are informing each other.
Yeah, there's definitely an elliptical quality to the film where you see the past speaking to the present. But on your point, yeah, I mean, it's on one, it straddles both the genre or a genre of film like horror, but also, yeah, I think at its heart, it's a drama.
Yeah, I don't think we never set out to make a horror film.
Yeah,
right.
It's just kind of the way that everyone likes to label stuff.
It's true, isn't it? I mean, I know for me, I think this might be my first, I've been working at TIFF for a few years with Face to Face, and I think this is my first Midnight Madness film, I think. But
well, that's great.
Yeah.
breaking ground everywhere.
And I think also Peter Kaplowski, who programs Midnight Madness, is really interested in kind of programming different types of
breaking the mold of what we expect in that genre, especially an oversaturated genre right now where you just see so many of the same things within it. But yeah.
I'd say like films like Don't Look Now and like Caché, films that are kind of horror but kind of not, have always been films that we've gravitated towards.
Or Green Room, which you know is definitely a horror movie. It's like a monster in a house movie but with neo-Nazis. It's like, but it's taking that genre and exploring something within it that's kind of exciting.
So I'm fascinated by the I guess you could say the scene that sets to say that it sets Miriam off is not what I mean, but sets a series of actions in motion. I'm trying not to tip, the story too much, but you shoot it and it's shot, and I'm sure this has a lot to do with your DOP and so on. But the tight close-ups, the music, the colors, etc. And I hope this is what you were going for, because boy, did it work for me, but it made it so much more harrowing and unsettling. And yet at the same time, I mean, there wasn't an exploitative edge to it at all, if that makes sense. And it was just a really wise way to approach it, if that means anything to you.
No, thank you. That means a lot. We filmed that over several days at least, at dusk.
At dusk, yeah.
And we were filming dusk as if it were dawn.
And not an easy scene to shoot. I mean, come on, right?
No.
So challenging for so many reasons.
We had several ideas of how we wanted to tackle that, and I think it kind of, we immediately knew as we were filming. As we classically when you shoot, you start with wides. And so we were starting with our wides, and we kind of knew instantly, okay, this is definitely not the language of this particular scene. And really what we were trying to evoke was that this feeling of, being trapped and
frozen.
Yeah. And it's, which you don't really see in these scenes that portray what happens to Miriam, which is a sense of an out-of-body experience where she is in shock, and there's a sense of shame that she feels not being able to undo what's
already happened to her.
Yeah, exactly. And there's something just being able to see the kind of texture of someone's skin and seeing all the imperfections on someone's nail just kind of amplifies the kind of horror of what's happening in a way that's it's not direct. It's this indirect horror that you're watching.
Well, if you humanized it in all the right ways.
That's great. Yeah, it was a very difficult scene to shoot coming from an acting perspective. I think
I bet.
Thinking about every scene, there were some really, really physically demanding scenes, like the vomit, and the actually the swimming in the lake was absolutely harrowing because it was freezing.
Right.
And we filmed it for 18 hours.
We did. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
but I think that scene was the toughest scene for me as an actor to shoot, because just emotionally it was really, it was really, really emotionally harrowing.
And
I'd love to know, did you guys debrief at the end of some of those days? I mean, you hear stories about people staying in character and actors, not coming out and having an impact on all of that. What do you do? Do you do a round of tequila shots before you go home, or you head to the hotel? How do you work through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, we were also the only producers on the film, so we were really double duty all the time, and so we were kind of working around the clock. But I will say there was probably one or two moments where I realized, I have to check in with Madeleine, and I part of my responsibility as a director here is to offer more emotional support when we're not filming. Being able to talk through what she's feeling and thinking, because the best kind of acting is seamless, because the actor is actually feeling those emotions, and she's going through such a gamut of incredible extreme emotions that it was really important, I think, to always check in to make sure that she was doing okay.
Yeah, there were times where I went to I pushed myself into emotional corners that were extremely painful, and Dusty really kind of helped me through that. And all it takes is just kind of a check-in and how are you feeling about that, and
right.
We'll chat afterwards, and it's fine, but it does require that.
And we had a wonderful tiny little crew that was so patient and supportive, and so they created that space for us on set, because sometimes between these intense moments, you need complete silence, and you need moments to recalibrate and to reset emotionally. And everyone was just so patient and understanding of that of Madeleine's process, and I think that really gave us a lot of freedom to work with.
Yeah, we were also living in a cottage with the DP Adam and with our line producer and our first AD, and that felt like a really close-knit family. I always felt like when we came home at the end of a shoot day, we were all there for each other.
Yeah, we were always, every night was a decompression, and as a little family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a little family, because this is a family film.
Yeah,
it is.
and honestly, I say that, obviously you can hear the smile on my face, but it kind of is, right? It kind of is. Do you think there are, do you think there are some things we can only learn if we feel them? I don't know if I've felt a film quite like this in such a long time without it being sort of, forced on me by the sound design or by potentially manipulative music, maybe, or okay, maybe I'm going to an extreme here, but wow. So anyway, it just made me wonder about that empathy, right?
Yeah.
For others, right? How do you get there? And maybe sometimes it is through this kind of an emotional extreme.
I think that's a really, really interesting question. And I think for me, I think speaking as a female filmmaker growing up on male content,
right.
I have an incredible understanding of the male experience and what men go through. And I think I very, very deeply empathize with a lot of male characters. And I think what it takes is exposure. I think that everyone has the capacity to empathize with other people and with all kinds of experiences. But I think if you're not exposed to it and you're not aware of it, it's more difficult. So the more that we can kind of make people aware of these types of experiences of trauma, for example, the more empathy there's going to be.
You guys are not going to believe me, but there is, and no one's going to be able to hear it, but you'll have to take my word for this. There is an ice cream truck that's going down the street, and I can hear the music. You know the music?
Yes.
It will forever haunt.
And everyone who's going to see this film now because of this interview is going to smile, I hope, a little later on. Is there a potential and I really ask this respectfully, is there a potential for a part 2 to this? Because it seems to me like there's so many places this could go, so many sort of unanswered questions. And you mentioned, Dusty, I think earlier, you left a lot out. Would you ever, I mean, I know there's certain themes that filmmakers pursue, et cetera, and you see them in their work and so on, but I'd love to hear some thoughts on that.
We are so excited to move forward with something completely new. I think we've been making short films for 13 years, and then together with collaborators
for 5 years.
For 5 years, and our shorts explore very similar themes of trauma and dynamics between men and women, and it kind of all culminated in the making of Violation. And I feel like in a really great way, it's a nice chapter, I think, in our life where we've been able to talk about a really difficult subject that's really personal to us. But I feel like we've said all we have to say, at least for now.
I think if there was I think if there was a character that we would take into a part 2, it would be Caleb.
Yeah, Obi, and who was so amazing to work with. So much so, like he came in from New York, and he was only on set for a week of rehearsal and like 5 days of shooting. But we kind of fell in love with him as an actor, and are now like just writing something just for him. But yeah, there's definitely a lot. So many places you could take this.
Oh, 100%. Well, and there's this deep, and I think this is a wonderful comment about the writing and the direction and the performances and all of the above, because there's just this deep sense of mystery to everything around the film: the look, the feel, the style, the people, the actors, and their stories. Like what was going on in Miriam's life before this? I need to know. I think that's a wonderful thing for you guys to have been able to pull that out. I think that's really, really quite brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. There's this character in if I don't know if you've seen Melancholia by Lars von Trier.
I have, actually, absolutely, and I saw, absolutely, one of my favorite von Trier films, actually.
I love all the characters in that film, but there's the one character played by Alexander Skarsgård, who is so perfect, and he's when I finished the movie, he was the character where I thought, I wonder what happened to him. Like what is that guy's story? Where is he? Where was he afterwards? Where did he go? And what was his journey? And that's how I kind of, Caleb was sort of our version of that character.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think we spent so much time with the actors really creating these characters and living as them. So we had a couple of weeks of rehearsal before we shot, where we lived in the cottage with the cast, and we just spent time improvising in character and creating these memories from their histories. So we'd talk about what are the pivotal moments in these characters' lives that would be important memories for them to have, and then we would create a time and a place to relive those, to create those memories, to live them, so that it really felt like the characters were fully embodied.
So I hate the fact that this is the last question, and well, it doesn't have to be, but it's one. Okay, but we got to wrap up soon at some point, right? What I love about what I do on Face to Face is, I mean, I could usually, not always, but usually just go for a couple hours, but I think we'd lose most of our listeners. Just a little atheistic shout out. I listened to a 2.5 hour interview with Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett in a bar once. Probably the worst sound design of all time. Glasses and spoons and things in the background, but I did it. So it's anyway. The therapeutic value of a film like this, I don't think, can be underestimated. I'd love to know, what did you guys take away from this whole experience? You've said a couple times how you're moving on, glad to be out of this sort of world. Were you on the metaphorical couch a little bit while you were making this film, and are you better people for it? It's a pretty big question. That's a pretty big question.
That is a deep question. And we're huge fans of Sam Harris, so that's great. I think for us, the writing, the directing, and the making of this film was very therapeutic and cathartic for us as filmmakers. It just helped us work through our own histories and our own past, and it's rewarding, I think, to be on the other end of it like this.
Yeah, I think it was purging, even just in kind of like how exhausting it was as a process. Right. When you throw something yourself that deeply into something, you're kind of exercising your demons, and it's like going for a really long run or running a marathon or something where you just feel depleted but exorcised. And
I think instinctually we try to avoid feeling negative feelings. And so it's very common that we'll suppress these kind of dark, horrible things that have happened to us because it's just too painful to kind of relive it, talk about it, think about it. And what the film did to us as filmmakers making it, and I think what it does to the audience, is it kind of forces you to go through this painful journey of exercising those emotions. And I think that's incredibly healthy to do. I think that's really one thing I've just learned over the years, is that it's good to feel everything. If you're feeling depressed or sad, or it's good.
You can only avoid it for so long before it catches up with you, or you're just avoiding for your whole life.
But this amazing thing happens when you actually feel what you're actually feeling. If you deny it,
it's good.
It actually, the half-life of it goes away much quicker.
It's so interesting. What a beautiful place to stop. You guys, or to end the interview, I think you guys have talked about, just dealing with the past and history, your own histories and so on, and to help the personal story. And I just interviewed earlier this week Diego Hadidi, who did the film at TIFF this year, Downstream to Kinshasa, and he talked about a place for memory.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can sweep it under the carpet, you can push it away, you can forget it. And some people, I suppose, heal that way. But I question the deeper sense of healing, I suppose, if you just avoid it. But stepping into it, is just, it seems to be so much more rooted in something that's holistic and healthy and relationally sort of based. And we're kind of back to family again, right?
Yeah.
Is right? Are we?
I think that what you just said reminded me of something that someone said to me once. Is they said the thing that everyone says, time heals all wounds.
Right.
I don't think that's true. I think that it takes more than just kind of forgetting about it or just letting time pass. I think there needs to be a purging sometimes. There needs to be a confrontation.
Yeah, and a thoughtful meditation where you can process what has happened in a way that's contemplative. And I think really that's what the film is. It's forcing you to contemplate things that you otherwise wouldn't want to. And the more we can do that, I think the better we will be.
And you are both philosophers first, it seems to me. And maybe I hope that's a good thing. What a pleasure chatting with you two today. We've been talking to Madeleine Sims-Feuer and Dusty Mancinelli about their new film, Violation. Thanks to you both. Really appreciate it, and had a great time. And if you're listening, please like us on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening. We'd certainly appreciate it. But thanks to you both for joining me today on Face to Face.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.